just ask if we are broadcast ready. I see that we are. Okay, thank you. Right, good morning, everybody. I am Mike Introna, Councillor Mike Introna, the chair of the committee, and I would like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Children and Families Select Committee that is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. So, good morning, everyone. So, item 1. Can I please ask the committee to approve the minutes of the last meeting? If you could have a show of hands on that, please. Yeah, okay, thank you. That's carried. Item 2. Apologies for absence.
We have received apologies from Councillor Debbie Darby for other reasons. No substitute has been sent. And we've had apologies from Councillor John O'Lee and Councillor Jonathan Wheeler is attending as a substitute. The apology reasons are for other reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask declarations of interest? If any councillor or officer has an interest in any matter on the agenda, you should declare it now. Please raise your hand if you have an interest to declare. If you have an interest to declare, you should state what type of interest it is and give brief details.
Save me repeating it. I'll make the same declaration of interest as I made on page 4 of the minutes for the ease of the clerk to be able to note it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Welch.
I'm a school governor at a local authority maintained school.
Thank you. So, agenda item number 4. Can I ask, Colin, are you in a position? Sorry.
Clear that I've got an SGA order that was granted for me last week. I just want to declare that because this. Yeah.
Councillor Callahan, thank you very much. Councillor Turner.
Trustee at Sparkhill Academy in Worksop.
Okay, thank you. No, okay then. So, item number 4, partnership progress in improving the experiences and outcomes for children and young people with SEND.
Apologies, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Chair. And if I could introduce my colleague, Rosa Waddingham. I think I've got your right title as Chief Nurse. Yeah. Rosa's my peer and represents the ICB part of the SEND partnership. Yeah, you'll remember the last time that members discussed this item. Yeah, Rosa wasn't able to be here, I think, for annual leave reasons, from memory, Rosa. But Rosa's commitment to be here in front of the Children and Families Select Committee it's clear. The report runs to 23 pages. It brings you up to date with the progress that we're making, and also refers directly to our external challenge and support that we receive from both NHS England and the Department for Education. Yeah, they've undertaken a couple of pieces of work since you last met, I think, which is a stock take against the improvement plan and a deep dive against the impact that improvement plan is having on children and young people. Yeah. The reports, the report refers to correspondence from DFE on behalf of themselves and NHS England, saying that stock take were assured that we were making progress against our improvement plan, which is good to know and understand. And Rose and I met with the Department for Education, who were speaking on their behalf, and NHS England a week ago Friday, to get some verbal feedback with regards to the deep dive that happened in March. And at that verbal feedback, they confirmed that they were assured that we're making good progress, against the plan, but that we were needed to show some greater impact, for that to be reflected by what parents and carers' experience is, and we hear really clearly that parents and carers, continue to wish us to communicate, even better than we're doing. If need be, Rose and I can talk about the events that we've had in the last 6 weeks. But over those weeks, we've met with literally hundreds of parents, carers, and frontline staff across health, education, and social care. And indeed, this evening we're meeting virtually with a group of parents and carers, again to hear their experiences and to share with them our improvement plans and the progress that we're making against those. I think, Chair, if I may, I would summarise it as making good progress, but a long way to go. There's a great deal to be done, and this is an improvement plan, the success of which there will be a sense check in October, November of this year when Ofsted and CQC visit again for 2 days for a progress. That won't change the grading, or the finding. It will just have a view to to whether they are in agreement with the Department for Education and NHS England that we're making sufficient progress on the plan, and then 18 months after that, so we're thinking summer term of 2026 will be a full re-inspection. So any local area that has the outcome under the new SEN framework that we have had will be inspected within 3 years, re-inspected within 3 years of the publication of the report. Our report was published May 2023. 3 years from that will be May 2024. I'll pause there.
Please forgive me, is it Rose or Rosa? Okay, thank you, Rosa. Rosa, is there anything you'd like to add, please?
No, nothing to add, other than, as Colin said, as a local area partnership, we do act jointly and for each other. So, other than to support what Colin has said, important for me to be here as part of that partnership before the committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith, would you like to add any comments?
I've got nothing further to add, Chairman, but happy to take questions as they come through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And any of the officers? Any further comment? No? Thank you. Okay, so I am going to move the recommendations of the report, which can be found at the bottom of page 32, and I am going to seek a seconder. Thank you, Francis. So I'm now going to open up to the floor for debate. Councillor Callahan.
Thank you. I'd just like to take to page 17.8. Is there any feedback on that? Also, page 18.11b. We can see that EHCP plans got down to 140 days. Unfortunately, they're rising again to 250, which is quite concerning. And by December 2024, we will still only be meeting or reaching 55% of these EHCP plans. I wanted to know what support, if any, is being offered to these children and their families, and why are we seeing such a rise in requests for EHCP plans? For myself, I would offer a suggestion. Partly it's due to the length of time it's taking for a child to see a paediatrician, having spoken to several families. I would say some of those factors are driving this increase. So families are going for an EHCP plan because they feel that they've got no other alternative recourse to get any support or services. And that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callahan.
So thank you, Councillor Callahan, for your questions. If I could start with responding to the reference to paragraph 8, page 17, and then I'll ask Peter McConaughey, excuse me, who's my service director for SEND and schools, to respond to the other points with regards to the increase of education, health and care plans. Apologies to committee if I wasn't clear. We had that feedback, they expected early April verbally. We're awaiting the letter. That feedback that we received with regards to the reference in paragraph 8, that we were making good progress against the improvement plan. Peter.
Thank you. Just in response to the question about 17A and the financial investment, the impact of that in terms of education healthcare plans, I think is that the point that we're referring to. That has had a positive impact in terms of both the additional educational psychology capacity that's been invested into the local authority, as well as staff within the Integrated Children's Disability Service. I think one of the risks with the additional investment is that, as you know, and as you pointed out, demand continues to increase. Therefore, there's a risk there in terms of balancing that. We can't continue to make that same level of investment, but it is having a positive impact. Currently, we've in the first 3 months of this year, 75 more education, health and care plans were issued within the timescale than the same period the previous year, and that move from 7% to 28% within timescale generally is showing you that impact of that investment. But it is, as you and I both will recognise, against a tide of continued demand pressure, but definitely having an impact and will continue to do so. In terms of the reasons why, I'm sure from a paediatrician perspective, I think, Rosa, you might have something to add in, but I think there's lots of reasons why demand continues to increase, and some of the work in the improvement plan is aimed at addressing that. And part of it is around parental confidence and the support and the access to support and the identification of needs of children and young people, which would drive a demand on education, health and care plans. There's a significant amount of work underway with SENCOs and education settings to not only review the graduated approach in Nottinghamshire, but to make it really explicit, clear and understandable, not only for parents and carers and schools, but also for other partner agencies and organisations who could also suggest an education, health and care plan is required. It is a rising demand that we see nationally, as I've spoken about before, not just in Nottinghamshire, and there's almost an expectation that if a young person could have additional needs, that they're entitled to that assessment. In some local areas, that's the only way to access additional funding to support with provision. In Nottinghamshire, that's not the case. In fact, we've had a significant increase in funding over a number of years, as close to children and young people as we can through education settings. But there's still a rising demand for that assessment. Lots of reasons, obviously confidence in the system, pressure from others, and that national push for an education health care plan, seeing that as a ticket to something additional. Pressure on other agencies who would also interpret the code of practice as saying if a young person has additional needs, then an EHC needs assessment is the right route to take. And we would always ask that parents, carers, and other professionals work with schools and SENCOs around meeting the needs of those children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith, sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Just building on Councillor Callahan's question about support for families. So, of course, every agency, whether it's us or the health colleagues, are doing all we can to add extra resource in to make it a quicker process to get an EHCP. But if it's your first child going through that process or not, it can be a bit like you're trying to swim through muddy waters, and trying to get the support you need and where you need it can be quite difficult. So what we're doing as a county council, as I said at the last committee meeting, is we've hired 5 education send pathway officers. Their job is, once that process has started for a family, is to engage with that family, make sure they're getting the support where and when they require it, to help clear that up a little bit. 5 are in post. They started in January 2024, and that is having a positive impact. But whilst you are waiting for that EHCP to be authorised, there can be more support within the maintained schools that we can put in. So at the moment, as I mentioned at the last committee, we're trialling at the moment different funding allocations for AFN and HLN at schools with a higher demand for SEND children. We're trialling that at the moment to see what impact it has if we fund change the funding formula for those schools. That's been trialled at the moment. If that is a positive result for maintained schools and the children and families involved there, then we will look to roll that out from September, and that's something I'm keeping a close eye on. But there is that support going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Rosalie.
Yes, I think to come back in around the point for paediatricians, we recognise that neurodevelopmental pathway is challenging, and we've seen significant increase in referral rates into that pathway. And in fact, demand for autism and ADHD assessments has increased nationally over the last 3 years. We've done some work aligned to what Councillor Smith has just outlined around ensuring that families referred into that pathway have some immediacy of support. And over the last 18 months, that now means there's no waiting time for that support when you go into the pathway. So as soon as you're referred into the pathway, parenting interventions, workshops, that additional support that 18 months ago people would have been waiting for is now available immediately. We still have work to do on reducing the length of waiting times to see a paediatrician, and that's because whilst we have put additional resource in to support that, in the first half of 2023, an average of 46 families were being referred into those services for assessment. As we came towards the end of the year and moving into this year, that's almost doubled to 99 families a month requiring those assessments. So we're trying to do a balance of redesigning the pathways, supporting people while they're waiting, and increasing capacity for those assessments.
Rosa, thank you. Councillor Henry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Rosa, for that. But this on page 29, point 51, we talk about there's 11-month waiting time for autistic spectrum disorder pathway. What I'd like to know is what support is being offered for these children, especially those in an educational setting.
Thank you. You okay if I just pick up and briefly respond around the support in place for education settings?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So our Schools and Family Support Service have got specialist teachers for autism who support with education settings, support SENCOs and teachers within education settings through CPD and other packages of support. And they also run a series of clinics in local areas for families of schools to access so that they can get access to that additional support to support children and young people in settings as quickly as possible, rather than having to wait for a service intervention. And so that whole focus, which again comes back to the code of practice about having that quality first experience in an education setting, is vitally important for children and young people who may be waiting for more specialist support through a therapeutic service. So that's in place, and that takes place on a regular basis.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Henry.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I hear your answer, Peter, but I don't think there's enough to go around. So what are we doing to make sure that there is more to go around? Because that, it doesn't make any sense to me from what I know is happening in the schools.
Thank you. So at the schools forum prior to the summer, budget setting for the next financial year has approved an increase in funding to recruit more specialist teachers into that team, specifically to increase the resource available to schools and settings. We've also increased the level of funding that's available through our AFN funding, which is available to SENCOs and administered through their family SENCOs to support groups of schools where that need is most prevalent. I guess a universal offer which is more supportive and more available to increase that capacity and support for children and young people in that circumstance.
Thank you, Peter. Rosa, did you want to just come in on that?
Yes, thank you. So some of this is linked to those pathway delays for assessment, I think. So that waiting time that you talk about for ASD, the pathway being 45 weeks on page 29. We've got a whole suite of things we're doing, and some of that is professional support. We have a family service neurodevelopmental support team who support families while they're waiting for assessment, who work with school partners. But as we move into this year, we've designed with Senko's, the Healthy Families teams, education colleagues, a new referral process, because what we often find is people go on a waiting list, they wait, and as colleagues alluded to earlier, they think they're going to get something extra. They think there's something more waiting for them once they have an assessment. And actually what we often find is that support could have been provided through the graduated response very early on in their journey, but they didn't know to ask. So the new referral pathway is online. It's got mandatory fields that ensure the graduated response, that the relevant colleagues, that people are involved at the right stages. Because if we can manage the demand to assess the right people at the right time, we'll have the capacity to respond to people in a much more timely way.
Rosa, thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I think demand over the years has increased, and one of the reasons that it will have increased is because we can identify issues a lot easier. And looking at the table on paragraph 9, there's been a 150% increase over the last 10 years in the plans. Going forward, what sort of provision have you got? Plans have you got in place? Are we expecting the increases over the next 10 years to increase by 150%?
Who's taking that? Is that you, Peter?
If I may take the first point, because I think Councillor Turner makes a really important point. And there is something about the increase of diagnosis and our understanding. Yeah, and it was a belief not that many years ago that autism spectrum disorder was something that only boys suffer from, or experienced, and that our special schools predominantly were with boys and young men in them. We now know much more about how that manifests itself for girls and the experiences that girls and young women experience with that. And we as across the sector, not just with Nottinghamshire, are much better at identifying that, and that does contribute towards the increased numbers of identification and need, which we sometimes describe as demand. Peter, can I hand on over to you about plans for the future?
Yeah, thank you. I think just to recognise that although we're seeing an increase in plans, actually that increase in early identification and meeting need early is also critical. So we've got 13,273 children in Nottinghamshire who have got additional needs identified and assessed and are receiving support to thrive, but without an education, health and care plan. So we will continue to see an increase in demand for education, health and care plans, which will bring with it planning around both making sure we've got the right resource to support and administer the support for young people with plans, but more importantly, that we're also making sure that we've got the plans in place for the children and young people who don't have an education, health and care plan, but clearly have additional needs that require support in order for them to make the progress and achieve all they can. So we're doing a significant amount of work with school Senkos. We've got a structure in place, district Senkos, within each district in Nottinghamshire, who work really closely with family Senkos. Family Senkos working with their schools, both in terms of the provision and planning for children and young people without an education, health and care plan, but with additional needs, and making sure that that provision is appropriate, adequate, and having a positive impact. So that's critical, making sure we've got the right level of funding available locally to address that growing population. And we've talked already about some of the increases that are coming through in the high needs block funding for local groups of schools and for Senkos. And we're working with our Senkos to design and with our head teachers to design how we monitor that and support locally, so we can respond to those shifts in demand at a more local level rather than just seeing it at a Nottinghamshire level So actually setting up we had previously had some locality working around this, but we're renewing that with our school settings to make sure it's more appropriate and has the right focus within each individual district that it needs to have, rather than being seen at a north, central and south perspective. So a much more local look at some of the global issues, and that's some of the plans that we've got in place. I think also recognising that need is identified earlier in a young person's life now, and we're adjusting our our funding support in line with that, so that those points of transition, for example, from an early year setting into a school, doesn't need to reset the system of getting support in place. In the same way as we currently have a young person in year 6 going into year 7, any identified funding to support with their needs would carry forward before any reassessment of that. We're doing a similar thing with our early year settings through, so that it makes sure that support continues with children as they travel through their educational journey as well. So that's some of the plans, but we will continue to work really closely with our schools. And in the summer term, we're planning to go out into districts following the roadshows that we've previously done, that Colin and Rosa have referred to already, which had a number of education settings. We're doing a more focused piece of work with our education settings about that local support in the summer term. Thank you.
Peter, thank you. Colin, thank you. To Councillor Smith, are you wanting to make a brief comment on this question? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Turner, for your question. Not all education, health and care plans result in the need for a special school place, but some do. So the Council is investing over £40 million into expanding and creating new SEND school places. You'll have seen we've allocated £20 million to Ravensdale Special School in Mansfield. That I was on site a few weekends ago with the local councillor there to talk about that. In your neck of the woods, we are expanding the special school there as well. I think it's by about 16 places, I think. Don't hold me to that, but we are putting money in there. So £40 million. The government gave us £16 million last week or the week before to help support that work, so we can look at where the need is, and try and spend that money where it's needed. But also, as I said at the start, not all EHCPs result in the need for a special school place. So there's more we can do to support children in mainstream schools. We have increased AFN and HLM funding to support mainstream schools, and I spoke about that pilot earlier when responding to Councillor Callaghan. We are doing that where they're in schools where the need is greater. And as Peter says, we've employed district SENCOs to support schools and families of schools in mainstream settings to help ensure children receive the education they require in whatever setting they're in. So there's a lot of work going into that.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Turner, are you okay? Thank you very much. I'm going to come to Nigel Frith next, please, and then Councillor Welch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to offer some reflections rather than questions as such. The first is listening to the radio on the way to this meeting this morning. I was struck by research which is being publicised today, which reflects on children who were excluded or suspended from primary school. The fact that a high number of them are now seen to have SEND needs. And the fact also that once they have been excluded at primary school level, they are unlikely to then go on to gain even English and Maths GCSEs later in life. So this is really, I think, to underline the importance of the work that's being outlined for us here, and I'm fully in support of the work that is taking place. In particular, I want to go back to something Councillor Smith talked about a few minutes ago, those 5 officers who are supporting families through the SEND and EHC process. I think that's vital, because the last thing we want is for a family where parents feel incapable of navigating these systems then find that their children are the ones losing out, whereas the more clued in parents, if you like, are the ones who navigate the systems and access the support for those children. And that's the last thing we want, is that kind of uneven playing field. So I'm delighted at those 5 places. My guess is that there will be a proven demand for more of that kind of support in future. My final comment is this, and I guess maybe there is a question behind this, and it's the fact that this is an election year. And I do feel strongly that education and what's happening in our schools needs to be high on the discussion list as we approach an election. And 4 specific areas that I would urge that we make sure are high-level discussion points are, first of all, send, as we're discussing now, because, as Peter mentioned a minute ago, the level of demand is rising exponentially. That's a national thing. That's not Nottinghamshire. There is an established and an evident need, and people are crying out for greater levels of support. If you match that to my comments a few minutes ago, then, on what is happening to children who are stuck with waiting lists and have needs that are not yet being met, and what can happen in their lives in that intervening period. The second one is mental health, and the third is attendance at school, because the many complex reasons why some children are not coming to school is speaking into our communities, into what's happening across our society. It goes way beyond the world simply of schools, and there is a screaming need there too. And finally, then, underpinning all of that, the level of funding for schools. So many schools are saying we're going bust. Despite our best efforts, we cannot see where to make any further cuts without removing teachers from the classroom. And I think this is urgently important. So I suppose my question in summary then is, does this committee have a voice, if you like, to say to DFE, we need more? This is important, perhaps more important than it's being seen as currently in national debate, and also in the discussions we are having in whatever our circles of influence may be. I think this is a good year to say we need higher level consideration of these issues. That's me. Thank you.
Nigel, thank you.
Chairman, just before we carry on, just to make you aware, they can't hear the meeting outside, where usually it's put out there. So there's people actually sitting and listening to the meeting that can't hear it. Just wanted to make you aware.
Okay, thank you.
Don't know what we can.
Hello.
Can anybody upstairs hear us? Okay, we're emailing the appropriate people at the moment, so we'll try and get that sorted ASAP. Councillor Welch, you are next, please.
First of all, I really welcome what you've said today. I think it's really important that we have people that are actually on the front line of this and dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, that we learn and have their opinion as well as officers. As you will probably know, lots of people already know, this is something I feel quite passionately about. So I'm going to start with the fact that there's a governance and ethics committee this week that will be reviewing why this council has been seen to be fault at 7 cases with regards to SEN that have gone to the Ombudsman, all of which are relating to EHC plans. Now, to my knowledge, I've been involved in children and people services for many years. This is the largest number that we've ever had in 1 month. And I'm just wondering how that compares to what you're saying here with regards to improvements that are being made. So that's my first point. My second question relates to how many in-year school places we actually have with special schools at the moment. at the different ages and the different levels. And the reason for asking this is I've had a number of schools contact me with regards to the fact that they have got SEN children within their schools at the moment that they are not able to cater for their needs of because their needs are so great and there isn't anywhere else for them to go. That the funding that they are being given for those children does not match the amount of money that they require with regards to a teaching assistant. And you've heard it already, schools are struggling with regards to their budgets. So that means extra funding to house these students that need significant amount of help and a significant amount of resources because there's nowhere for them to go at the moment. I'd like to know how many we know of in Nottinghamshire with regards to that. In addition to this, if I can turn your attention to page 18, where it talks about, you'll have to excuse me because I'm not there myself, where it talks about how long it takes basically for EHCPs to done. And we know that there's a statutory requirement with regards to that, which we're all aware of. On page 18, it says there's been some improvement, which of course we welcome that there has been some improvement. But if 28% are getting it, that's 72% that aren't. That equates to 3,052 children in Nottinghamshire where the assessments are not happening in the statutory time frame that they should be happening in. 3,052 children in Nottinghamshire. And if you want to throw back at me, well, it's worse in Derbyshire, or it's worse in Derby City, or it's the same as Lancashire, I get that there is a national problem, but I want to know why these children still aren't getting the assessments when they should be. And that's with me, actually, Councillor Smith, actually acknowledging the fact that there has been some improvement. I'm not acknowledging that. My concern is, once again, at this council, how did we get to the point where we're suddenly having to put all this in place? What a great job that we're doing, that now with 28% might be getting it, when 72% still aren't. That's a real worry and a real concern. And a lot of that, I think, is falling back into schools as well. And the schools are feeling the pressure when their budgets are under pressure. In addition to that, I think I've asked this question before and I've never got the answers, I don't believe. But I would be really keen to know where these SEN, EHC, referrals, assessment requests for these assessments, where they are in Nottinghamshire and where they're happening and what some of those outcomes are. Because I think we've had it before. Some people are really good at navigating the process. Are there more pupils in Mansfield? Are there more pupils in Ashfield? I think it's really important because, again, this is about linking to levels of deprivation. So that's very important that I think we as councillors know where these children and young people are. And then I did have another point as well with regards to we've talked a lot about family hubs in this council, and in this meeting again we've talked about early intervention. So my question is, how are we going to ensure that early intervention with regards to SEN is linked with our family hubs? So previously, when Sure Start was a thing, that was very much integrated within Sure Start, and I would like to see that happening again with additional resources in those areas that have got the greatest need as well. And last but certainly,
Councillor Welch, there's a number of questions there. I'm quite happy for you to raise.
Got one more.
Quite happy for you to raise the additional questions a second time. But I just feel that both the officers and the members need the opportunity to answer the ones you've already asked. If that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Welch. If I respond to your question about assessments not happening in the 72% part of it and what we're doing to try and address that, I'm then going to hand over to colleagues on the technical questions about in-year send places, etc. So, look, there has been an improvement of about 23.5% increase in the number of EHCPs offered in the timeline. That's a good increase from the 4.5% baseline that we started. But I said at the last committee, and I will continue to say for however long it needs saying, is that whilst that improvement is good, if you are part of the 72%, it's not good. And we need to do more to address that. And as Nigel made clear, that's a national picture, not a Nottinghamshire only picture. And that's why we are where we are, and that's why the Send Improvement Board meets. And if you read from paragraph, I think it's paragraph 13, page 20 all the way down, Nottinghamshire County Council accepts that if you're part of that 72%, there's more we need to do to support you. What are we doing? Send Improvement Pathway Officers are employed, as I mentioned earlier, to engage with families at the earliest point possible and help them through that process and ensure they're getting the help and support they require when they require it. Employing education psychologists is a bit like finding gold at the end of a rainbow, but we are trying to do that. By 2025, the education psychologist team will have secured an additional 9 full-time posts. 3.6% of that capacity has already been recruited for start dates in September 24 and 25, with further recruitment starting last month. We are obviously using external support at the moment to help bring down those waiting lists, and that's what we're doing. Also, with 6 additional EHC coordinators have been secured to increase capacity in the drafting of EHCPs. So that has all that I've just mentioned there has contributed to the increase from 4.5% to 28%. That 28% still isn't good enough. We're continuing to address that by putting in extra capacity, but it's a partnership working with health as well, and we hope to be in line and better than the national average by the end of this year, and we'll continue to work towards that. Peter, if I can hand over to you for the technical.
Yeah, just to come in on that same point, and I would never come to any committee and report that we are in a good place, having made the improvements we've made. There is a significant way to go. I think I attended the Governance and Ethics Committee that you referred to, Councillor Welsh, in February to discuss education, health and care plan timeliness, given that that's where the complaints to the Ombudsman are heard. I would, and it may be that the report that was submitted to that committee in February 2024 would be something that could be shared with this committee, because it's relevant to this and details in a bit more detail the steps that have been taken and the progress that has been made, and fully acknowledges that although that improvement is taking place, that it's still not good enough. Information that I've currently seen, where nationally it's around 50% within the statutory timescale, that is now being put under pressure nationally and reducing, or we are continuing to increase. Now, by the end of this year, our ambition is to attain 55% of our statutory assessments within timescale. That still won't be a place to shout, well done. We need to continue improving until we're at 100% of our assessments within timescale, because that's what we should be delivering, and that's the stage we need to get to. So it's not just Nottinghamshire that's struggling, but we are making significant improvements from where we were. If I can just I'll try and pick up some of the other questions that were raised. I may miss some, so feel free to come back to me.
If you can, briefly.
No problem. In terms of special school, specialist provision, there is a specialist provision place planning strategy that clearly indicates and has highlighted that we need more provision than we currently have within Nottinghamshire. In fact, the current place planning strategy noted that the need for an additional 490 places by September 2026 required, and that plans were in place to deliver 243 of those last year. We have got the additional specialist school planned to open in 2025 in Mansfield, which will address some of this need. There are other plans in place for increased provision across Nottinghamshire, and we can share that with the committee if that would be of benefit to them. Yes, there are too many children with specialists named within mainstream because of that sufficiency challenge that we have, both within our maintained specialist provision sector, but also within the independent and non-maintained, which is a much more expensive market, but even that can't provide the additional space that we require within Nottinghamshire, which is why we're working through our place planning board to seek to increase provision further. Nottinghamshire County Council did submit a bid last year for a DFE funded free school, SEND free school, which was not successful because the demand was too great nationally. Similarly, with the alternative provision free school bid that we submitted, again, the demand was too great nationally for Nottinghamshire to be prioritised. Although feedback from the Department for Education was that there was nothing we could have done to strengthen the bid, it was simply a case of that rising demand. So it's something we're really aware of and are working towards making provision ourselves within Nottinghamshire. I don't have the figures with me here around the children in mainstream who have specialists named, but that's something we can share after, if that would be a benefit, and I can have that circulated to members of this committee. And we do know where the Education, Health and Care Plan requests are by area, and that's a data set that we can share with the committee. It's not one that I will be able to pull up immediately on my laptop, but I'm happy to share that information with yourself and other members of this committee afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So we've noted the comments around sharing that information. Councillor Welch, did you have one last question, please?
Yeah, just it wasn't really answered. There's a governance and ethics committee taking this week that has 7 cases that have gone to the ombudsman where the council has been found at fault. That is not in line with what is being said in this report with regards to going in the right direction and achieving what we should be achieving. So my question to officers, whoever wants to deal with it, how does that balance with what is being said in another report, and why wasn't that within this report as well as to what was happening? Because that is a big part of this with regards to scrutiny. So a big part of information meeting. If I hadn't have read those governance and ethics committee reports, I wouldn't have known that was going on. So why was that not included in this report? It's a huge oversight, maybe, I don't know, but it should be in this report. We should know about those things in this committee. That's my first point. That wasn't really addressed. It was about the report previously that I have actually read in February. I just want to stress the fact again, because I don't think it was addressed, the amount of funding that schools are getting for SEN students, often that are high level of autistic on the autistic spectrum, doesn't match what the schools are having to pay in order to make sure those children's needs are met, which is putting further strain on schools' budgets.
Okay, Councillor Welch, you've already made that point.
Yeah, but it wasn't answered. That wasn't answered. How much are we paying schools? Okay. This is really important questions that have been raised by parents and schools to me, which I'm asking.
Okay, you've made the point. I think Peter did mention in terms of some of the difficulty. He didn't tell me how much. No. In terms of mentioning the difficulty in accessing some of the funding.
And so my last point is page 23 on point 17, where it says about, and I know that you've alluded to this, Councillor Smith, with regards to the 9 additional full-time posts, the educational psychologist service. That is really, really welcome. It's really hard, isn't it, to get educational psychologists at the moment. In relation to the demands which has been highlighted in this report, 3,000 plus children and wanting to meet 55%, how many staff do you envisage actually that we need in order to meet that demand? Do we need a significant amount of more staff? Do we need a significant amount of, and is there any placement planning with regards to funding? Because if we get to 55%, that's a lot more children with a lot more need, which is a lot more financial strain on this council's budget. We want to meet those children's needs. How much more funding do we think we might need?
Thank you, Councillor Welch. Just on the point about the 7 individuals mentioned, I don't think it's an unreasonable question to ask or just understand. Is that a spike? Is it a trend? So, yeah, if you can give some feedback on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, if I may come back to that point. Thank you for your question, Councillor Welsh. And if it's the view of the committee that information with regards to ombudsman outcomes should be part of one of these future reports, we'll put that in the future report. Yeah, it is in the public domain. It's in a report that's been published. That's why Councillor Welch is aware of it, and it will be considered by the Governance and Ethics Committee later this week. It is the case that increasingly parents, in their frustration, with regards to the SEN system up and down the country, are increasingly using the pathway of using the local government ombudsman, and we're seeing a significant increase in local government ombudsman reports with regards to this area. And if someone takes something to local government ombudsman and says, my education, health and care plan was not done within 20 weeks, and it wasn't done within 20 weeks. That's a slam dunk, finding against the system. And as we know, there is a significant number where that is the case up and down the country, whether it's 72% in Nottinghamshire as it is currently, or whether it's 50 to 5% or 51% in other local areas on average up and down the country. Nottinghamshire's, and I've said this before at this committee, Nottinghamshire's budget for next year will be about £120 million high needs block. It's an increase of, since in the last 9 years, from £58 million, and a significant increase from last year. We spend all of that money in distributing the money to children, young people and schools. There is an ongoing discussion, I think, within education policy as to whether schools needing to meet the first £6,000 of additional needs is right, wrong, or the right, wrong approach. It is a policy approach, not of Nottinghamshire's, but of the Department for Education and across the country. The SEND system is subject to both review and reform, nationally, and we'll be keeping up with those approaches.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Just really quickly, Chairman, and you've heard me say this, Councillor Welsh, before, but just to reiterate, there are areas where there are Nottinghamshire policy and not DFE policy. The allocation of AFN is certainly one of those policies. We're reviewing that. There's a pilot going on at the moment with a particular family of schools where they have more children with SEND needs in their schools than other families of schools across the county. We've rearranged the funding formula just for that particular family of schools. That's being piloted at the moment. I'm keeping an eye on that. And I hope to be able to roll that out in September across the county, which will change the funding formulas that families of schools receive, but it will change it for the better for those families of schools that have a higher need and demand for those funding pots. I'm not saying that will cover the cost of a teaching assistant, but it will certainly help it at the schools that need it most. That review's ongoing and we hope to roll it out from September if it's successful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. Can I just say that whilst I wouldn't expect members to keep asking the same question over and over, I do appreciate the context of statistical peer groups and national averages for comparison and for us to just discuss them, but we do only need to do that once as well, if that's okay. Thank you very much. James McGeechy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted first of all to pass on some thoughts from schools. They are very appreciative of the work of officers on this response plan and are noting some improvements. Colin, you're right though, it feels like it needs to pick up momentum for them. A couple of things I wanted to point out or ask about are in the letter that came from the regional directors following the stock take. The first one was about SEND governance structures and ensuring they are robust and providing the right level of oversight. So my first question is, could you summarise what those governance structures are around the SEND PAP? Because I'm not completely clear about where this group fits into that and what the other organisational bodies are that have oversight of ensuring the plan is being met. And then the second thing from those bullet points of further improvement was effective capturing of the SEND improvement programme reset narrative. Could you give us a summary of what the reset narrative is for the SEND improvement programme?
Who's going with that one?
So if I start, this is a partnership, and the governance and oversight it talks around is a partnership arrangement. So it relates purely to the improvement plan, not necessarily your governance of SEND in its totality, but that improvement plan is enacted through a set of 6 working groups, which we're jointly and responsibly both represented and accountable in. That comes through to a partnership assurance improvement group and then to an executive oversight group chaired by Colin and I. At each of those steps, it has representatives from across education, health, social care, our parent carer forum and people with lived experience, including partners with health who are part of the frontline delivery. So it's scrutinised by Dame Christine Lenahan and that independent improvement board, but from the executive perspective it then feeds into our usual governance arrangements through either this committee and Colin and your representatives here, or in my case into the Integrated Care Board and Health Oversight through that same route. And some of the commonality is that we send the same reports, we take the same information, we're really clearly aligned in a way that we weren't. And that governance has become much clearer through that reset process that's alluded to in the letter. And that reset has allowed us, quite rightly, a year on, to look with a different set of eyes about how we organise ourselves and report and work together to create the improvement, as you say, with the most pace possible, which we recognise is what we need moving forward.
Thank you, Rosa. James.
I had a second question as well. Just picking up on funding for special educational needs. It is a concern the level of funding doesn't match the requirement of staffing to deliver the improvements. And I just wonder if there's any comments on the fact that the 6,000 notional comes in first, we understand that, but then when we're awarded funding afterwards to top up, that's still allocated at a rate of pay from 10, 12 years ago. Therefore it becomes far less appropriate, the amount we're getting, to what is agreed is the need. And surely the level of funding needs to come up to modern standards so that if someone is being told that you get X number of hours, the funding matches that. And that is a real issue in schools at the moment. The line I hear all the time is there's not enough money in the system and it's too hard to get it as well.
Thank you, James. Peter.
I'll feed that back to the Department for Education, the funding organisation. James, thank you.
Peter.
And just in terms of locally, with the funding that we do have available, just to reassure the committee and education settings that the HLN funding budget has been increased by £1.4 million for the 24-25 financial year. And rather than just increasing the pot of available funding that can be distributed in a historic funding formula, that there's actually a review of the funding bands for HLM 1 to 3 to ensure that there is an uplift that better matches, when added to that £6,000 notional, better matches to the level of provision and the cost of that provision for schools and settings. So hopefully that will be well received. And that's something that Dr. Orla Green and the SEND funding team are running through at the moment. That should be detailed on the high needs funding for Nottinghamshire mainstream schools document that's shared with schools and SENCOs. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So before we move on to Martin, Councillor Purdy-Horan, is there anything you'd like to add or ask?
No.
Okay. I just have a couple of items very quickly. If we look at page 21 in section E, 13E, the very last sentence where it says all children and young people who are waiting for an EP assessment have their needs and circumstances to assess whether they are considered as being in exceptional circumstances before being added to the EP waiting list. It just for clarification for me, is that prioritised up the list rather than added, or what?
Yes, that's prioritised. So those children, young people who are at greatest risk would be prioritised above others.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. And Colin, you mentioned the stock take and the deep dive and feedback expected early April. You suggested you've already had some feedback. Will we, is that correct? And will there be some key outcomes and actions from that we can share?
We've shared the letter from the stock take, which is the letter that James referred to. We are expecting and we're hoping that we'd have had the letter for the deep dive today. When we receive it, we will circulate it to members of this committee through your own chairmanship.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll ask Martin to read out any further recommendations that have arisen from this discussion.
Yeah, so just to note what Colin's just said, so the written feedback on the 6 monthly deep dive carried out on the 19th of March to be circulated to members of the committee once available. Secondly, the further information on the HCP requests, where they're located geographically, be circulated to members of the committee.
along with also HCPs in place by geography. Thirdly, the information on children with assessed needs and the HCPs in mainstream schools on the numbers be circulated to members of the committee, and the future reports contain outcomes of ombudsman inspections.
Thank you. So I will move those additional recommendations and ask for a seconder before taking the vote. Thank you, Councillor Purdy-Gora. So if I can take a show of hands and have a vote on acceptance of this report. I think that's unanimous. Thank you all very much. So, agenda item number 5, and I'm conscious of the time already. Developing the approach to meeting children's needs through the multi-agency safeguarding hub MASH. So I would like to invite Councillor Tracy Taylor, the Cabinet Member for Children and Families, to introduce the report. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. The purpose of the report is to brief you all on the work being undertaken to further develop the multi-agency safeguarding hub, the MASH, so that the approach enables more children to access the right early help and support through signposting, advice and guidance to community-based professionals, or through direct access to early help services. So the report that you've got in front of you does various things. It describes the background and context to the reason for trying to develop a new front door. It outlines the process that's been completed with some external consultants recently to give us fresh eyes on our approach and our thinking. Some test work that's been undertaken, because this is about not sort of stopping something and starting completely afresh. It's evolving things, and a little bit of test and learn to see how we evolve things best. And finally speaks about, or gives you an overview of the next steps for the project, so how that work stream continues. So I think that kind of just captures what's in the main paper, Chairman, and obviously happy to take questions from members.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Do we have anything from any of the officers to add? Nope. Then I'm going to open it up to the floor for debate and discussion. Councillor Callahan.
Councillor Taylor. Surprise, surprise. I actually like this report. I actually do. Because I think... No, hang on a minute. Because we're actually... Yeah, you take the win, Tracy. Don't worry. Because we're working with other authorities to see what works well. You know, so we're not just stuck in our silos, because I think for a long time we have been stuck in silos. And actually, I have read it, and I've read it several times, and coming to the test 3, I thought that was, you know, really, really good, and I thought that would be quite helpful for families who have felt frustrated in the past because, you know, you've rung up, it doesn't meet our threshold, there's no interventions here for you, there's no support, and actually it's a whole new look at it, because initially it was safeguarding, but when people ring the MASH, it's more than just safeguarding, and I don't mean that, and they want support and help in other areas and interventions, and I think this one would certainly meet that criteria. So I think it's well done, Tracy.
Councillor Callahan, thank you. Thank you for your input. Do we have any others? James?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very much welcome the creativity of this piece of work. I think it's excellent. The question we would have from the school's perspective is the capacity for this, and when it's rolled out, will there be the capacity to keep processing the number of referrals that are coming through in this new, more effective way? And what we do here regularly is that sometimes it does take a long time to get that response. So getting the right people listening to the referral is really important, but making sure that all of the referrals can be reviewed carefully and not take longer would be really important for us.
James?
So I think I would start by trying to contextualise some of the challenges. So we've got stats in the early figures about how the MASH in effect has been what we might say is a victim of its own success. So by having this operating over the last 12 years, paragraph 3 shows that the number of referrals has gone up from about 15,500 to 31,500. And again, bear in mind this is a multi-agency safeguarding hub, but we as the local authority, have that social care responsibility. Referrals come in from our partners, be they health, police, or indeed schools. Paragraph 3 also says that the fact that the referrals has doubled is not because there is a doubling of need in safeguarding terms. So one of the dilemmas that we've faced is that we have taken a lot of referrals from people, be it schools or others, who are seeking advice, whereas the MASH has been delivering help and services based on thresholds. So a great number of those extra referrals are NFAs, no further actions. So when assessments or investigations have been done, no further action is required in safeguarding terms. So going back to that notion of it being a victim of its own success, capacity issues have been born out of the increased demand on the MASH to actually investigate things which perhaps didn't need to be investigated or considered. So I think there is a tendency, and we all see a lot of national cases, headline cases. We do not want to be in the position of not having pursued those real risk safeguarding issues. And there has been a fear that says if there is a chance that this referral might be one of those, our partners will refer into us, which occupies time and capacity, which could actually be spent better on the ones who have the need. So at the moment, I would say we are in I always use the seesaw analogy. It's getting the tip and tilt so that we are not over. There is not an over-demand such that the capacity that we have falls over, but we need to provide the support that is needed. And I would say not only for the threshold, the high challenge, high risk threshold-led enquiries, but for the early support, which comes back partly to what Councillor Callahan was saying. So at the moment we have a system of meeting thresholds. These ones will get the attention, these ones will be no further action. But in actual fact, some of those might have needs that could be met through a low-level service delivery, so early help. And if instead of having step up, step down and always looking across which side of the line something falls, we actually can direct an inquiry to the right place at the right time, the ambition is that by doing that with these low-level ones, we don't have that crisis management. And then the nature of meeting need and having capacity to meet need changes. And I think I probably explained that really badly, but it makes sense to me.
No, it does make sense to me as well. I think the real danger is over the years, people who work, particularly with young children and young people, have been almost terrorised into needing to report every single thing that they're worried about. And so our staff in schools now, they log everything to within an inch of their lives. They spend so much time logging things, and they are really worried that they will miss something. And there have been so many high-profile cases out there where we have missed things, and we drill into our staff that we have possibly one part of a jigsaw and it needs to go into one area so that other parts that will be known by individuals can be brought together. So it just felt there was a little bit of a suggestion in there that sometimes schools over-refer or people might over-refer, and I think that's a dangerous message to send out. I do like the idea that it will be triaged in a different way. I think that's important, but our colleagues work very hard and know these families really well in schools, and sometimes they've got an instinct or just something that isn't sitting right, and I think it would be dangerous if we said to them, you shouldn't refer that.
I think that this is one of the difficulties, and officers will maybe come in and correct me particularly if I misspeak. There has been a perception that the MASH is a holder of all information, and the MASH is not there to be a holder of all information. So there's a little bit of a misapprehension that a school referring in will be putting something in that is one part of a jigsaw, and the MASH will have all the other pieces. That's actually not correct. So that is one of the reasons why we would say, and it's not just schools, it can come, you know, I had conversations with Rosa's colleagues when we do the, I call it the SAGE, but I'm not good with acronyms today, but one of the improvement groups for the Safeguarding Partnership, when we talk to partners, we might get too many referrals from health colleagues, for instance, because they are concerned that they might be missing something, but the MASH is not, nor was it ever designed to be, the constructor of the jigsaw. So by getting those referrals, because the schools or health have been encouraged to refer everything so we can pull the pieces together, is one of the reasons that we've become overloaded and that we're finding the no further actions, because in fact the only piece of the jigsaw that we have is that one. And because it hasn't then met threshold in the way that we've been addressing needs in the past, means that it is a no further action and nothing's happening. So there is still a risk that referring everything is wrong, but that's why we're changing the approach of how we receive the information then, because the school will have, as you say, they know those families and those children well, and frankly sometimes you don't even have the information. I would say you just know it smells, for want of a better expression. Sometimes you just know in your gut, and so the concept around this is giving people the opportunity to speak it through, and can you give us the information that will take us over a threshold to go in a certain direction, and if not, are we identifying another set of needs that needs meeting within the wider family group? Because as you well know, it's not just about the child, although the child is at the centre of it. This is frequently about the people around the child and the risks that they either present to themselves or to the child. So yes, I understand why you might be nervous, but in actual fact it is that kind of over-referral that's led to some of these challenges. But I would even contend that if that's led to us having a new way of thinking, maybe that's not a bad thing in itself. And I'd just ask if officers want to come in at all on that.
Yeah, Amanda, you indicated you'd like to come in.
Yeah, I think this is all about rebalancing the system. So really thinking about at the very first point of need what a child's needs might be, rather than thinking about thresholds and where in the system which threshold is met. I think the other thing about schools is having that team around the child approach, so having a team of people who can go out and support schools, thinking about what it is that they're concerned about, thinking about where in the system the child's needs are best met, rather than having a social work assessment that actually doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't provide support. Really all it does is provide the organisation with assurance that there are no safeguarding concerns. It doesn't provide the support that we would want it to provide. So it's about early identification, rebalancing the system and making sure that children get the right help at the right time.
Yeah, and I would also say, unfortunately, there's a little bit of protect yourself in this. If it's reported, then you've done your bit. If it goes horribly wrong, it won't come back to you. And there is probably an accountability failure in the system because we are so worked up about getting it wrong that we're overburdening ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last one from the floor, Nigel.
First of all, Tracy, thank you very much. It is a good report and very helpful. My two questions are these. One is there's a comment in the report about meeting need, not threshold, which is at odds with the perception of schools that I'm hearing, where they're saying, when I refer, it is all about whether we're meeting threshold or are we not. And the perception then is if we don't meet threshold, well, then it's down to us to try and meet the need from resources we don't have. So it would be great to see that shift. Is that shift taking place and is it being communicated to schools? My second question is referring to something you said a minute ago that I found really interesting. Who does construct the jigsaw? this may be a naive question from me, but who is it who's looking at different concerns, different referrals, and saying there's a growing picture here that means we have a child in need? It wouldn't necessarily meet threshold through one route alone, but when you put the puzzle together, you realize there is something important being conveyed. Who puts the puzzle together is my question.
Thank you, Nigel. Just before we move to the next questions, can I just add in there, if we're talking about threshold and need, just for those of us that are, and it may only be me in the room that's still on the steep part of the learning curve on this subject, just a very brief explanation of the differences, pros and cons of threshold-based and need-based. That'd be great. Thank you.
If I take the one about the needs and thresholds, is that so? Rather than thinking about so the pathway to provision that we currently have clearly sort of like outlines criteria, if you like, for making a referral to the MASH. What we would like to do is have a way of looking at a child's situation that is about the needs of that child, rather than thinking about, you know, a tick list of criteria to meet the need for a social work assessment. So to be actually looking at the child's situation, looking at the system and seeing within the system where is the best place to meet that need. So that might be an early help need that can be met through the family hub, or it may well need a social work assessment. But if we're thinking about it as a need rather than a threshold, I think it will give us it will provide children with the right help at the right time if we get it right, and we will.
And if I can just come in on the back of that, just sort of in the distilling it down to, I suppose, not that that wasn't plain English, Amanda, but sort of more simplistic. The purpose of the MASH is to identify children who may be at a safeguarding risk, and that's where the notion of threshold comes in. Is this child at such risk that there needs to be a social care intervention? And that's the threshold. But a child might have lower level needs, or the family might have needs that mean that the child is not necessarily at a risk that would allow a social work intervention, but that there are things that could be done to improve the life of this child and family, if that makes sense. Yeah,
makes sense to me. Councillor Taylor, thank you for the explanation. Colin.
So tying all of that up together, if I may, Chair, and coming back to Nigel's point with regards to the jigsaw, yeah, I'm trying to put it as plain English as I probably can. Yeah. So when we think a child's at risk of significant harm, in need of protection, we do the jigsaw. We do the phone calls to the GP, to health, to school, yeah, and anyone else that might be involved with the family to check that. Yeah. What we don't have is the consent to do that for all families where there hasn't been consent and the family aren't requesting a service. Yeah, because there is a clear evidence in the performance report that you'll receive at page 59, yeah, that we're intervening in many more families' lives to no end, yeah, in Nottinghamshire than up and down the country. Yeah, so 61% of families who contact is made, there is no further action. 31% in average across England, and therefore we are intruding in too many families' lives. Yeah, to no, as I say, to no end. Yeah, and I think that frustrates families, frustrates schools. Yeah, one of the things I have had, so the very plain English adage is what we do need is to find that needle in the haystack of that child that needs help and protection and safeguarding, and on occasion to be looked after. Yeah. What we don't need is that when we're in the haystack trying to find that needle, more hay being thrown on, yeah, to the haystack. And that's the conversation that we're now having with those agencies that are the primary referrers, and the two big ones, yeah, are schools, and we're very grateful for schools because they know their families and communities best, yeah, and the police. Yeah. There are very few referrals into MASH that actually come directly from families saying, I need you to help me help protect and support my children. Feedback I'm getting from schools is really positive about this piece of work and how they have been involved in co-production. Yeah, I'll finish there.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Okay. Councillor Welch. and this will be the final one
I
from
think
the floor.
it's all been answered, to be honest. I think so. The only thing, the only other thing that I was going to raise, which hasn't already been raised or answered, was just about that percentage of people where it doesn't meet the threshold. It was about pathways, but I think that's already been mentioned as to where that goes. But also whether we're analysing some of those results, and if some haven't met the threshold, and then say 6 months later do meet the threshold, which my experience of in the past working in safeguarding, that very often happens actually, that schools find something very early on and then 12 months later actually it does become an issue. Is that being mapped at the moment against, you know, the progress that you're moving forward as well, just to make sure that we have got it right?
Okay, so again, I'll ask officers just to give more sort of meat to the bone in a minute. Yeah, the short answer, Councillor Welsh, is yes. I mean, it's important to recognise that this is not a report that says we had a way of doing things, we don't do it that way anymore, we're now doing it a different way. This is very much a report about this is the journey that we are a few steps into. And that notion, when I spoke to Councillor Callaghan's comments earlier, this is an evolution from where we are. So there are lots of things to be considered, like the over number of referrals. I referenced the difference between the social work interventions, the formal ones, and early help and support, and whether we can have more of that early help and support, meet certain needs because we identify them, Councillor Welsh. So yes, we are looking at some of the data we would have had in the past is how many families are being referred, stepped down, and then re-referred. And we've also had between social work and early help, we've had that step up, step down, step up, step down, which tells you you're not really quite getting to the bottom of it. So yes, it is being considered, but I will hand over to officers just to speak to you about that.
I think Councillor Taylor's actually answered that. We are looking at the data. We are looking at, you know, sort of like re-referrals. And what our hope would be is that our number of re-referrals would reduce significantly because we are getting the right help at the right time to children and families. Of course, children's lives change, so there may have been a referral a year ago and another referral now, but it might be completely different, you know, sort of like reasons. But if we can get children the right help at the right time, it just rebalances that system, and that's our ambition.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Welsh? Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Juhora.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and please forgive my ignorance. Paragraph 18 refers to public protection notices issued by the police. Could I have some detail about what sort of incidents would create PPNs and why these now represent a significant proportion of referrals to the MASH? Thank you.
Police protection notices is the mechanism by which police refer into the MASH. Police officers who are out in the community refer anything through a PPN to the MASH that involves a child. A lot of those PPNs are actually not relevant in terms of safeguarding concerns. So we are doing a lot of work with the police on thinking about how to triage those PPNs rather than them all coming through to us. I think that's probably the simple answer.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Okay. So it's a well-received report. Clearly, there's some good work going on in this area. And I'd just like to say thank you for the work that you've done and that you're continuing to do. And thank you, everyone, for your contributions. Martin, do we have anything to add?
I think obviously this will all feed into the work programme, but not standing anything else, a further progress report in a year's time to see how everything's kind of like moving on. Obviously, when we look at the work programme, it may shift around slightly.
Okay, I'm fine with that. So we'll add that as a recommendation. So I'll move that and just need a seconder. Thank you very much. So I'll move this to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous again. Thank you all very much. Councillor Wheeler, thank you very much for attending today. So we move to agenda item number 6, progress with the sufficiency and commissioning strategy for children in care and care leavers. So I'd like to invite again Councillor Tracy Taylor, Cabinet Member for Children and Families, to introduce the report. Tracy, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So with this report, it's to update you on the progress that's been made since the publication of the Sufficiency and Commissioning Strategy for Children, the 23-25 strategy. That strategy sets out how we as a council area intend to meet the sufficiency duty that's placed on us under the Children's Act, and that is to have a sufficiency of places for children who come into the care of the authority, be they foster placements or residential placements. So, we've got some highlights in the report, things like the fact that we have a below national average rate of children coming into local authority care, and that is a relatively stable rate. The way that we're rolling out family network meetings, which is a process of involving family and friends in the support of care plans for children. The very recent launch of Foster for East Midlands, so a regional recruitment and retention service for foster carers across the D2N2 footprint, and having attracted £1 million of DFE funding towards the sufficiency priorities we're working on. There are also some concerns in there, of course, such as the fact that we are struggling to retain foster carers, and the rate of progress for our expansion plans for the internal residential estate. So I think probably best to leave it there, Chairman, and just answer questions from colleagues over anything that they've picked out in the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. So I will open this up to the floor for debate and discussion. I knew you could answer this, Councillor Archer. Michelle, please.
Thank you. Financial implications, really important with regards to this area. In the report on page 54, it does talk about, the average weekly cost of a foster placement, etc. What is the financial situation with regards to children in care at the moment? I know at one stage, and I think we've lessened this, but I don't remember reading anything official about this. We were paying a significant amount at one point of children that were going out of Nottinghamshire into care homes in Derby and Derbyshire, to not only meet specific needs, but also because we didn't necessarily have the capacity here. So my question is, well, we've got here about the weekly cost of the foster placement. What is the financial implications overall, and is that something you could share with the committee at some point, with regards to where are we spending that money? How much are these placements cost? Are we still going out of Nottinghamshire? Whilst also on a personal level, I also appreciate how much pressure there was on with regards to this, and actually foster carers is actually even a national issue, particularly since the pandemic. I've been read in reports, actually some national reports, but I'm always concerned when I see financial implications on an area such as this, which I know the cost is huge, but there isn't actually any underpinning financial information here, and I think that is important to this committee for scrutiny.
Councillor Taylor, or?
Thank you. I will hand over to officers for some of the more detailed stuff. I think it's important to note in the first instance, it's not about literally where a child is placed. It's not costing us more because a child is placed out of county. It's the nature of a placement that leads to the different costs. So we could have a Nottinghamshire child in the care of a family who are fostering for Nottinghamshire, but who happen to live in Derbyshire or Doncaster. But they are my internal foster carer resource. They will cost, in effect, the lowest price, probably. We will then have children who are in the care of other foster families, again, be they in Nottinghamshire or a little further afield, who are recruited and therefore working for independent fostering agencies. So they're not in our direct, call it employ and control. So you've got in-house foster caring, you've got IFA carers, you then have the children's residential estate, which is again either those homes which we operate or those which are operated on some form of partnership arrangement, like the one we have with Homes to Inspire, or on block contracts, and we have a block contract with Homes to Inspire and others. So, forgive me, Chair, I keep addressing colleagues instead of you. So it's the nature of the care support that dictates the price more than the geography of the placement. And it is true that we are placing more children in homes at the moment because of the shortage of foster carers and family placements, and therefore the cost of having a child in a home, be it in the county or further afield, is always much, much higher than it will be to have them in a family setting with a foster family that we're supporting. Officers will have the figures for you more, and I know that the figures are reported regularly in other places, so it's not that they're being hidden or not reported anywhere. It's just that the ballpark figures are given here rather than the overall cost.
Thank you, Chair. Average cost of an external placement last year was £119,000 per year. Average cost of an external placement this year is £132,000. What that adds up to is a budget of £108 million. That budget is forecast to spend £111.2 million. It's covered in report.
The next report.
7. 7, yeah. And that level of overspend, £3.2 million, is about 3% of that budget line. Yeah, but it's masked by underspend in other areas. So, for instance, a £0.7 million underspend in our internal foster care, and it is indeed the case that we're seeing a reduction in foster care across the country. Yeah, but this report highlights that we're seeing a reduction of in foster care in Nottinghamshire that is above that of average, and we need to reverse that. Yeah, around how we support, yeah, how we value, yeah, and indeed consider how we fund our foster carers. We're doing that on a D2N2 footprint through the new project funded by DFE, a £1.8 million grant to do that over the next 12 months. Yeah, with Doncaster, with show my geography, with Derby, Derbyshire, Nottingham, and Nottinghamshire. Yeah, and we can bring a report back to this committee if wanted about the progress that we're making on that.
Okay, thank you, Colin. It's a pretty comprehensive response. Michelle? Okay. Rachel, please forgive me.
That's okay. It was just coming on the question around location. We measure ourselves on whether or not we can place young people within 20 miles of their home, and if not, then within 20 miles of Nottinghamshire. It's one of our vital signs. I can't get the report to run for me at the moment, but I know that the last time I saw it, we're improving. So, in fact, that number is better than it was last year when you heard about us having to place outside of Nottinghamshire, and I think we're performing better than that national average on that. So the fact that we don't have as many foster carers doesn't mean that we're placing further away from Nottinghamshire. We're able to identify these expensive placements, but they are close to home.
Rachel, thank you very much. Councillor Callahan.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much in this meeting, but I will say, going through an SGO, it could have been done a lot easier. I thought it was very difficult for myself. If it wasn't that it's my great-grandchild, I'd have said forget it. So I think, we need to learn some things that families going through an SGO could probably be doing it a little bit different.
Okay, thank you. Is that something that we can?
Yeah, I would just comment there, not to be discussed in this forum, but I would say that we would always welcome feedback, because that's how we shape and improve the services. So something to be discussed elsewhere if you would consider that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anne. I know it's a subject very close to your heart, so please make contact and let's have the benefit of your experience and expertise. Thank you. Councillor Percy Horan, anything from you? No, and nothing from me. I am aware that I'm guilty of not moving the recommendations before opening up to the floor, so I'll take the opportunity to ask Martin if there are any further additions.
Just one thought. Obviously, I think a progress report would be good, but obviously one of the recommendations is that's about to be moved will be that we do a task and finish on this, so that the update report will probably be based on the back of that. And I know Colin has provided some further information on the actual cost, but I think that we actually just get that further information on the costs involved in the different types of care and the amount spent, circulate to members of the committee so they can look at that at their leisure. That would be helpful.
Okay, so with that and the recommendations on page 54 of your pack, I'd like to move those and ask for a seconder. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chairman, and I'll put that to the floor to vote on. All those in favour? Again, unanimous. Thank you all so very much. And so, agenda item number 7. Children and Families Departmental Performance, Risks and Financial Position for Quarter 3 of 23-24. I would like to invite Councillor Tracy Taylor, Cabinet Member for Children and Families, and Councillor Sam Smith, Cabinet Member for Education and SEND, to introduce the report in whichever order you would like, please.
Thank you, Chairman. But given that there are the both of us and only the one service director, we thought that would be a really appropriate way to only have one voice speak on this.
We all love to see effective delegation in action, so long as it's effective and efficient. So, Colin, I'll let you.
And I don't wish to contradict Councillor Taylor, because that's not always the best thing to do, but I've got 3 of my 4 service directors behind me, and I'll respond as the single corporate director for children and families. There's been a bit of a theme this morning, Chair, if I may suggest, across the 3 reports, substantive reports that you've heard today already, which is around sufficiency, increase in demand and expectation, and indeed need, whether that's around SEND, the MASH, or sufficiency of looked after placements. And I think this last report, and indeed this report, shows that it's a credit to the work that Martin and Lucy are doing, in particular with yourself, around crafting an agenda that actually hits the key things that we need to consider. So this last report is broken into 3 areas: performance, and it starts off between pages 57 and 60 around SEND, and I think you've gone into that in some detail. But page 60 looks at the high performance against assessments. So where a family does require an assessment, that's assessment in terms of being in need of help and support. That you can see that is achieved in a very timely way. Not only has it improved in terms, page 60 I'm looking at, in terms of over time, but is very favourable compared to our statistical neighbours. Page 61, it looks at children becoming subject of a child protection plan for a second time, and that speaks to some of the stuff that Nigel and James were referring to earlier, where if we become involved with the family and we're not able to support them in a way that's sustainable, kind of becomes a bit of a revolving door. When our numbers were too high, they're reducing, and we'd hope to see those reducing to continue to reduce. And then on page 62, with regards to performance, you can see the information there, that again looks very favourable both across time and to within our statistical neighbours. The next part of the report talks about risk, and you'll see it identifies 4 strategic departmental risks: placement sufficiency, SEND, and child protection, ILACs, and you've considered, which includes sufficiency, and you've considered all three of those in some way today at today's report. The one area that you haven't considered in this committee, and indeed I don't think it's on the forward plan, is some stuff around workforce recruitment and retention as a fourth leg of our reputation. And then the final part of the report covers the finance, which I've touched on partly a little bit earlier. The outturn for Nottinghamshire Children and Families Service is about 1.6% overspend on its budget, which represents about £3 million of its £188 million budget. I understand that from speaking to my peers. It doesn't give me much comfort, but I understand that is the lowest level of overspend of a children's department in the East Midlands, where I'm seeing other local authorities where their overspends are in the double figures, and that children's services as well, excuse me, well reported to be an area under significant pressure, particularly with regards to the costs of looked after children and special educational needs and disability. I'll pause there, Chair.
Okay, any other comments from officers or members? No? Okay, I'll open this. I will not open it to the floor. I will move the recommendations on. If I get that quickly. Page 66, and I seek a seconder. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And I will now open to the floor for debate. Councillor Welch.
Yeah, it's not a criticism. It's just literally a question. On the appendix where it says about the key performance indicators under, I'm sorry, but when we've had it sent to us, the first few words are not included in the report, but it's under the keeping children, vulnerable adults and communities safe. Only 4 of those indicators within them appear to be moving in the right direction. Well, I'd love to tell you, but it's not. I think it's
69.
69. It's the one after the under the keeping children, vulnerable adults. The only 4 of those indicators appear to be moving in the right direction, and albeit some of them are only kind of a 1% difference maybe, but 9 of the measurements are worse than what they should be, than what they were, well, worse than what they were in the previous year. For example, social care carried out within statutory timescales, protection plan for 2 years or more, SGO or CAO, place 20 miles or more from home, they've slightly gone in the other direction. I just wondered whether we were onto that, and whether there was any specific reasons, which you don't have to say now, but they're going in the wrong direction, not in the right direction, according to the years before, if you compare it to the additional year before. So it's just a question with regarding to that we ensure that we're making the progress in the right direction. And I will say, albeit some of them is like 1%, so that could be a slight, could be a couple of incidents that just throws it over, but just to have awareness of that, please.
Okay, just before we move to a response, Councillor Welch, on that, is there any particular one that stands out for you that you'd like to specifically address?
I've just mentioned some of them. So the 4 that appears to be meeting our child protection plan, and I can apologise because the first word has been not printed out on this. Child protection plan on more than one occasion is better than it was. Reviewed within timescale is better. Base setting is better, and suitable accommodation I think is about the same. All the rest are moving in the wrong direction.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. So I will hand over to officers. I don't know if it'll be Rachel or Lucy to perhaps comment on the data, because I know both of them tend to pore over this most of the time, I think. the comment I wanted to make, and I don't know if it's for the committee clerks or a message to the print room. This particular page formatted badly last time, and when I got my pack, it formatted badly again, and I just went and printed that one myself. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done in prepping the committee papers that means that we get this complete, so it's legible for members. As I say, I think that might be a print room matter. But if I can ask officers just to respond to the questions, thank you.
So in terms of the appendix report, you'll see that I think following feedback from committee when we last met, there's a third column now called direction of travel. So where the percentage difference isn't statistically significantly different, you'll see the rate is showing as stable. So I think a number of the indicators that you've described there are, from a data perspective, sufficiently close to what they were last quarter in order not to be for us to have a trend line of either improving or deteriorating. What we're seeking to do in the overall report, the covering report that supports the appendix, is to identify where we do see something that's significantly improving or deteriorating, the actions that are being taken in order to address concerns. So I think one of the examples would be around children on a child protection plan for a second time or more, and I'll just bear with me while I navigate back to the overarching report. Potential children becoming subject to child protection plan or a second subsequent time. You can see within the overarching report that what we seek to do is to narrate there what's been done to try and improve that position, which links to the work that Amanda was describing earlier around trying to make sure that we get the most effective support both through our front door work but also wider work that we're doing in our social work services to try and make sure that children are receiving holistic support through the support they receive. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucy. Anyone else? Colin?
If I may, I'll maybe take this outside of the meeting with Councillor Welsh to understand this a bit better. Yeah, I'm not sure if so if I take the top line of that section called Annual Delivery Plan Ambition 3, percentage of children and family assessments resulting in no further action, it's desirable that that number is as low as possible. Yeah, and it has gone down. Yeah, so that's the arrow's down, but that reflects an improved performance because low is desirable.
So it would help if this document was. Yeah, but that's
looking
just
around
one
for yeah.
Yes.
I'm just wondering whether the four and Councillor Welsh, I could fully understand why. Yeah. So there is something, I think, Chair, yeah, for us to look at how we report our performance in a way that is clearer rather, yeah, as to rather than having to interpret an arrow, a low, a high, yeah. So there's maybe another column that just maybe has a little summary line that says this is an improved performance. Because what I don't want to do is set here's running. Yeah, when.
Yes, it might also be useful where we are tracking against just a second, where we're tracking against statistical partners, etc., that we use a colour for Nottinghamshire that shows up really boldly on a black and white print, because some of those are difficult to see. So thank you, Councillor Welch.
Or have them on the screens would be quite useful, maybe in a situation like this, because it is quite hard to read, and then you can actually identify it to us. And of course, the RAG rating on a number of those that I have highlighted with them are still on red. So that, I think, is my point: is if we're moving slightly in the wrong direction and they're already on red, I want to know what's going on. As a committee, we would want to know what was going on with regards to that before it gets to a situation where it's any worse, and whether there's anything that we need to make a decision on with regards to that is very important. So those reds, certainly, I think we need some feedback on how long that we envisage the fact that they're going to be red, when we envisage that they are go to amber. Thank you.
Councillor Welch, thank you.
Yeah, I would completely agree, Michelle. There's several things that are clearly visually there's several things that's clearly wrong with what's in front of committee members today. The first being that the data doesn't even sit on the paper; it's falling off the edge. And as Colin's already said, sometimes a down arrow is a good thing, and sometimes it's not a good thing. So there's something about the way that the data is presented for ease of understanding. and then that will allow you to focus on the ones that give concern and actually direct questions on those so that we know how we're addressing it.
Okay, thank you. I think it's fairly reasonable that if we've got anything in red, it's worthy of a little bit more content. If it's going down and improving or going up and improving, depending on the perspective, then it's worth noting that. But if it's not improving, or it's getting worse and it's already in red, then I think that's something that we should be having a discussion about, and it should be clear to us all that that's the case, so that we can open it up correctly to the floor. Okay, anyone else? Councillor Percy, hold on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What will be the key areas of challenge with regards to performance over the next quarter, 6 months, 12 months?
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, well, I would start by simply saying those costs. So, getting placement sufficiency right, and so that if we've got more foster carers, it's a less expensive placement budget. If we've got fewer foster carers, it's a more expensive one. So I would say the biggest challenge is the really obvious one to budgets, having placement sufficiency in the right mix. Officers may say that, give you more detail on that, I don't know.
Yes, so from
Lucy, please.
Thanks. I mean, I agree with Councillor Taylor that you can see from the performance report that we've got a number of metrics that identify as red, where in the performance report we identify what we're trying to do. I think the improvement work that we're doing through our front door, through the MASH work that we talked to earlier, but also wider work that we're doing in response to the National Children's Social Care Reform, to look at how we can provide more holistic multi-agency support to children, whatever level of need they're at. So whether that's early help to children through family hubs, or whether that's the way that we're seeking to improve outcomes for children who are at risk of harm, so who are being supported through our child protection services, making sure that those children, that our services supporting those children are as providing the most effective high quality practice supporting those children, which also then talks to supporting those children to remain safely at home where possible to do so, and or living in family-based settings when that's not possible. So from a children's outcomes perspective, the focus on addressing placement sufficiency, particularly around internal fostering, is really, really important, certainly for both children's outcomes and also from a financial perspective. So I think those challenges, coupled with the ongoing work that we're doing around support for children with special educational needs and disabilities, all of which need to be supported by an effective workforce, because it's actually through whether it's our social work workforce, our educational psychologists, our wider colleagues working in early help services, they're the people who are making a difference in their work with children and families every day, whether that's by us as a council or with our partner organisations who are also supporting those children. Hence, I guess, the way that the risks have been triangulated in that section of this report, because those things coming together are the things that will make the most significant difference.
Lucy, thank you very much. Councillor Smith, did you indicate that you wanted to make a very brief contribution?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's been heavily children and families there at this meeting, which is welcome. But from an education and SEND perspective, our key areas for focus are school absence, as was referenced earlier, along with exclusions and the impact that's going to have. But also, of course, there's the SEND improvement work that we're reporting to committee at every meeting. Ofsted are due back in the autumn, so there's a lot of focus on improving that service, which we've spoke about at length today. I don't know if PT, want to add anything?
At risk of being told off by the chair for continuing, I think those are definitely the areas of focus. I think as a committee we'd want to be cited on some of those challenges, so I think we're well cited on the challenges around SEND and the work that's underway there, but I think there are some risks both nationally and within Nottinghamshire around absence from school and the impact that will have on children and young people, and I think school exclusions plays a part of that, as well as speaking to the points made earlier about mental health and support. So those are definitely key areas of focus.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, the only contribution I've got is that, yes, the talk around retention and recruitment, I think I've seen that from my involvement in pensions committee, that seems to be a challenge across the council. One thing I will say, just while we're on recruitment and our people, is that I've been in this role just for a few months, and I've been astonished at just the scale and depth there is in children and families departments, and I've been even more astonished at the level of professionalism, determination to make things better for children and families, and all those other things that we get from our officers. And I'd just like to say thank you to you all for your contribution on that. So I'll move this report to the vote. We did. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So all those in favour? Thank you very much. Carried unanimously, and we will move on to the last agenda item, which is agenda item number 8, which is the work programme. And I will ask Martin if you would introduce this report, please.
So the work programme, just to note, we're going to the end of it now because we've only got one more committee meeting this year, so there will be work happening over the next few months with yourselves, the chair and good officers, to work out what the work programme will be looking like for next year. From the meeting today, and obviously this just item we've just had, I think recruitment and retention within children and families, that is something that we can add to the to be scheduled item, to scheduled list even, so that's come from the meeting today. So it's just to ask if anyone's got any comments, and also just to remind everyone, if you have got comments, you don't have to wait for a meeting. You can just let myself and the chair know in between, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay. Any contributions from the floor?
Chair. There
Councillor
is,
Welsh.
says information briefings for committee meetings. Well, we've had information on the HAF programme.
Can you just say which page, please?
Sorry, page 88.
Right.
You know, the holiday activities and food programme that we run. One of the biggest holidays that we have is during the summer holidays, and I was just wondering whether we could have a briefing as a committee as to what's going on during the summer. It doesn't necessarily have to come here, but I think last year there was some frustration in September that we hadn't known how it was actually going to pan out or something, if I remember rightly, and then there was another briefing in it all. So it's to avoid basically what happened last year. If we have the information prior as to what is happening with regards to the HAF programme, how that those on free school meals, whether it's happening in the same way. Does that make sense to people, or am I just
Makes sense
making
to me.
knots and
Councillor
turns
Welsh.
at all?
Colin, do you want to come in on that?
Chair, can I suggest that we provide a briefing note that I'll ask Pom Bogle to draft with regards to the plans, and also the length of time that that programme is committed to, because it's funded in this current spending review, and we don't know anything beyond that period, and that will then inform members as to whether they would need further discussion on it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a time scale when we might anticipate a briefing note being presented by?
We already have a draft, so I think certainly within this week, yes, yeah.
Shall we say by the end of the month, just so that we don't run into, in case you run into any obstacles? Michelle, you okay with that?
If I could just add, Chairman, I think there are two parts to this, because I think that what we'll be discussing is the performance of what we have had, or what was delivered in the last year's worth of programme, if I'm correct. Bearing in mind it's a draft I haven't seen yet, that's why I'm not sure. But I think what Councillor Welsh is asking, I think what Councillor Welsh is asking for is you want to know, as it were, the future, not the past. So it may be that we've got a report on the last year's worth of activities, which is already in the sausage machine. But my understanding of your question was that you would like to know, so it's kind of two parts to it, I would suggest, Chairman, if I've understood correctly. So officers are suggesting that we can get POM to do an appendix to the report I'm expecting, which will give you that summer holiday bit, as well as the formal report on the last year's delivery, if that makes sense. Thank you.
It makes sense to me. And are we
I'm
comfortable
so glad.
that we can add both elements of that before sort of by month end? Yeah. Lucy, is that a nod? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? In that case, I will thank you all for attending the meeting, and I will close the meeting now. Thank you all so very much.